like us to bow down our heads and pray. Please, we are praying. Father, we thank you for life this morning. We are grateful for the life you have given us, for keeping us to this day, for the safe journey you've granted us. We are grateful even for the thought of organizing the program and for the strength and the wisdom you've given to the organizers. We are grateful. Father, we are beginning the program and we are committing everything into your hands. We are saying that take us through. Father, this conference be an interesting one. Let it be a memorable one. Let the issues that will come up be worth discussing. And may we be impacted, changing our thinking and our perspective after this program. May it be exciting to the extent that we'll look forward to another conference, even when the time is not due. We are committing all the presenters, all the speakers, people who are chairing fun sessions and all that into your hands. Whatever we are doing, the IT, everything into your hands. May it be a success. May everything be well organized. And we pray that anything that is unexpected that will disrupt this program will not come to pass. We are committing everything into your hands. We know you are a faithful God, and you have started a good thing. We'll bring it to a successful end. We thank you in Jesus' name. We have prayed. Amen.
Thanks for the prayer, Dr. Tufo. Some few questions for thought. Did you know that about 1/3 of the food produced globally go waste or is lost? Or that households consume about 29% of global energy and they constitute about 21% to carbon dioxide emissions? If we don't change our production and consumption habits by becoming more responsible, we will cause irreparable damage to our environment. Hence, the relevance of our theme for this conference, integration of responsible production and consumption into development agenda of developing economies, exploring policies and scientific options, which is under the SDG Goal 12, cannot be overemphasized. So we have gathered here for a very good cause. To steer the affairs of today's function, we would like to invite our chairperson, and it's my pleasure to introduce him. Our honorable chairperson is the acting pro-vice chancellor of our August University in the person of Professor Edward Riafe Deborah. He doesn't want me to say anything about him. So since he's here, he'll speak for himself. With a round of applause, can we welcome him? Honorable Chairman, your audience.
Thank you so much. If you were a student, I would have given you 5 months for that. Good morning and welcome to the third Sustainable Development Conference. Our keynote speakers, researchers, fellow lecturers, university community, ladies and gentlemen. This conference is being organized by the University of Environment and Sustainable Development, and it's still hosting it in Somenya, our campus. It is an honor and privilege to stand before you today as the chairman of this esteemed event, focusing on the theme integration of responsible production and consumption into the development agenda of developing economies, exploring policies and scientific options. Sustainable development is not a catchphrase, but a solemn commitment to creating a better world for ourselves and generations to come. The theme of this conference resonates deeply with the challenges and opportunities that developing countries face in their pursuit of progress and prosperity. It underscores the crucial need for responsible production and consumption as integral components of sustainable development. No wonder the organizers chose today, 7th September, being the International Day of Clean Air, to be the beginning of this conference. Thank you so much. In a world characterized by complex and interconnected challenges, from climate change and environmental degradation to economic inequalities and social disparity, it is paramount that we adopt the holistic approach to development. Responsible production and consumption practices lie at the heart of this approach. They require us to rethink how we produce, distribute, and consume resources, taking into account the long-term consequences of our action on the planet and society. Ladies and gentlemen, today we've gathered a diverse group of experts, scholars, policymakers, and thought leaders to engage a meaningful dialogue and explore innovative solutions. Our aim is to bridge the gap between theory and practice, to transform knowledge into actionable policies, and to harness scientific innovation for sustainable development. Throughout this conference, we will delve into the integrative responsible production and consumption into the development agenda. We will examine policies that can drive change at local, national, and global levels. We will also explore the scientific options and technological advancements that can support sustainable practices and foster economic growth and development. I encourage all of you to actively participate, share your insights, and engage in constructive discussions. Let us leave no stone unturned in our quest to find practical solutions and develop a collective roadmap for responsible and sustainable development. As we move forward, let us remember that the choice we make today will shape the world of tomorrow. It is our shared responsibility to ensure that these choices are informed, equitable, and sustainable. By working together, by integrating responsible production and consumption into our development agendas, and by harnessing the power of science and policy, we can pave the way for a brighter, more sustainable future for all. Once again, I welcome you all to this significant event, and I look forward to be fruitful exchanges, collaborations, and outcomes that will emerge from our discussions over the coming days. Thank you, and let us begin the important journey towards a more sustainable and prosperous world. Thank you so much. The honor given me, I accept to chair this function.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for accepting to chair today's function. We have come to the time where we'll have our Professor Vice Chancellor, Professor Eric Nyakun Samson, welcome us and give us his opening remarks. Unfortunately, he's not able to be with us here in person because he has another engagement within the university. So we shall invite the media team to play his speech for us. Thank you.
Management, staff, and students, I welcome you all to our Chairman of Conference Planning Committee, Acting Deans of Schools, Directors of the University, distinguished guests, esteemed researchers, staff and students of the University, media men and women, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am happy to deliver a welcome address to the third edition of the Sustainable Development Conference organized by the University of Environment and Sustainable Development, Somenya. On behalf of the chairman and members of the University Council, management, staff, and students, I welcome you all to our humble campus. The first edition of this conference, held in Akosombo, was revealing, impactful, and educative. Last year's edition built on knowledge full of sustainable ideas for the benefit of Ghana, Africa, and the world in general. UESD to the world. I believe this year's would be a good, an educative, and an informative one. The theme for this year's conference, integration of responsible production and consumption into development agenda of developing economies, exploring policies and scientific options, which I presume is derived from Sustainable Development Goal 12, is about ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns, which is key to sustain the livelihoods of current and future generations. Unsustainable patterns of consumption and productions are root causes of the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. These crises and related environmental degradation threaten human well-being and achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. As academics and practitioners, it is important for us to work together to improve resource efficiency, reduce waste and pollution, and shape a new circular economy. By considering the second part of the theme, we will then have to put our expertise to developing the world and making it a better place to live in. As the university envisages creating knowledge through research for national development, I believe that through the quality research papers that will be presented by our astute researchers, multidisciplinary systems thinking will be explored, aimed at exploring policy and scientific options that will lead to the attainment of the various targets of the SDGs. At the 2022 conference, 4 of our students partnered with 2 of our faculty members to present papers. May I express the delight of management of the university at the news that this year, 3 lecturers have collaborated with students on 16 papers and will be presenting their research at this conference. A student section has been crafted for them. What mentorship! This is the UESD way. Whilst we acknowledge the efforts by these faculty members, we commend the boldness of these young students to step out to the international platform. Congratulations. We have not forgotten the encouraging words and words of commendation by the chairman of the university's governing council to the students and the faculty members, respectively. I am certain these words served as the booster to increase this year's numbers. In response to this, the management of the university has decided to pay the registration fees for the 4 students under the Vice Chancellor's special dispensation. I am informed that everything necessary to ensure a successful conference has been put in place. However, please do not hesitate to draw our attention to issues we might have glossed over, might have escaped us, or might have paid little attention to during the planning stages. You are in Somenya, the capital town of Yilo municipality. This is a town known for beautiful and well-crafted oven-made African beads for all gender, all occasions, and all ages. So ensure you get one or as many as you desire before you leave. The Greenwich Meridian passes through a part of the town. The Greenwich Meridian represents the historic prime meridian of the world, longitude 0 degrees, an imaginary line last established in 1851. This is the line that divides the eastern and western hemispheres of the world. From it, we got the Greenwich Meridian Time, that is the GMT, as it is used as the basis for the world's time zone by a convention adopted at the International Meridian Conference of 1884. To signify where this line passes in this town, the Prime Meridian Monument has been built. I read it is called Greenwich because it passes through a place called Greenwich in London. Can we therefore call it Somenya Meridian Line because it passes through Somenya? Built by no mean a professional body than the Ghana Institution of Surveyors, you may visit the place and take a historical photograph to show where you have been on the whole world. Kindly contact the conference information desk for any assistance you may need in any of these. The desk can, as much as it may, be of help to you. I wish to commend members of the Conference Planning Committee and other supporting staff of the university and students for the immense effort channeled into the organization of the conference. I wish you all a successful conference. I thank you for your attention. Long live the academia. Long live academia industry collaborations. Thank you.
Dr. Boka is a development economist. Chief analyst.
There is National Development Planning Commission. So it's a commission. So first of all, on behalf of my own Director General of the Commission, Dr. Benjamin Brenta, I'm so excited to be here, and this is my second time being here. Um, that was about 3 weeks ago. There was a program that the commission was invited, and that brought me here. And I really enjoyed the environment, the cleanliness, and then the reception. This morning, I was having a chat with one of my colleagues, and you could see the professionalism of how people receive you when you enter the environment. So please keep it up. Mr. Chair, Professor Edward, Deborah Biafi, the Vice Chancellor, who through technology also joined us and gave us a message, heads of institutions, lecturers, and I see some colleague friends here, student media, and all our participants here. You are all welcome. And thank you very much for this space to give, from the government perspective, what government is doing when it comes to the development agenda and how we integrate the global goals, of course, where the Goal 12 fund is served. I must say that this choice of Goal 12 is really relevant because it's something that we all live with it and we see it every now and then. As a commission, we have done a lot of work in that area, and we have seen how that has a lot of implication on other goals. For example, how that has implication on goal 1 of achieving no poverty, and many other goals, and sanitation, that is on goal 6. So this is a very welcoming topic, and it's, I think, very great honor to be here to speak on this. Now, maybe just to take you through some journey a bit, so that to be a form of education from policy perspective, how things are being integrated in the development agenda, and of course that matter, Goal 12, how we normally consider that in our integration. So per our National Development Planning System Act 1994, at 480, you observe that it gives the commission to work and coordinate our development decentralized planning system. So for all the sectors and districts that you see in this country, they all have plans and they also report. And how does that start? So if you have been following us carefully, you see we issue a policy framework, and with that policy framework, it comes with a lot of collaboration, engagement with stakeholders before it comes out. So it's more technical, but it goes through every arena, and it receives input from stakeholders across board. And once that document is COVID-19 hit the global and of course that of Ghana, for the first time we incorporated a whole dimension as emergency preparedness to be able to respond to emergency as a country. It is out of this policy framework, once it is produced, that all the sectors in the country and all the districts is actually informed by that policy framework. And the framework, if you look at our political cycle, our election period, for example, we are going to have it next year. The framework covers up to 2025, so that once there's been a change, because normally in the first year of a government in power, there's not much that can be done. So the sectors and then the districts rely on that plus 1 year that the policy framework covers. So are their plans and the district plans also doing. Now, in that process that we go through, there are so many things that we do to be able to ensure that we are able to integrate the global goals. So we have the SDGs. We also have the Agenda 2063. Sometimes Agenda 2063 is a bit missing in our communication. But that's Africa's own agenda, Africa's own aspiration. It's an area that we also need to prioritize. In fact, it is older than the SDGs. Prior to the SDGs 2013, we already have our agenda ready as an African continent, and we are to pursue that up to 2063. And then, of course, in 2015, we have the SDG, which countries responded to, which Ghana also did that. So these two goals and other commitments specific ones on issues around human rights and gender and all that. These global goals are then integrated in this framework. And once that is done, so for example, if you take our policy framework, what you see is that per each dimension, if you take social and economics and all that, per each dimension, you see we discuss the progress. What are the challenges and progress in that area? And then we tease out what we call policy metrics. In that policy metrics, you will see that it's a table, a very simple table, but it has certain aspects. So we've placed them under each team. So there's a team on food and nutrition. There's a team on social protection and all that. So for each of them, there's a table that explains what are the policy direction of government. Right, so what is the policy direction? So we have the objective, we have the strategies that are there. And you could see clearly that when we are doing it, how are we aligning with the SDGs? And then, of course, the agenda is 3. So what we do here is that we go to all the targets of the SDGs. So, for example, there are 169 targets of the SDGs that every country is pursuing. 169 targets, and they are all unique, but they are interrelated among themselves. So we look at what each of them is actually speaking to, what we want to achieve as a country, and then we align with each of them, right? So that's how we observe it in our policy framework. Now, in doing that, we are able to also to see how Agenda 20 also come into play. So we align each of them in our policy framework so that when a sector, let's say Minister of Finance or Energy or let's say a district in a particular area want to pick it and prepare their plan. In preparing their plan, they also align with what has been done in the framework. So in that order, you will see how we are progressing as a country and integrating the Agenda 23 in it, and then SDGs in it. So sometimes we do hear this, that there is no, as a country, we have not been able to do this and that. The truth of the matter is that they are there. They are there, and maybe as a signal, you may want to always be checking the NDB's website. There's so much information that you can find for your research, for your information, and many other things that you can do with it. So, as a country, once we have this, we are able to itemize which areas of the SDGs. So, if we look at Goal 12, in our last VNR in 2022, what we did, VNR is Voluntary National Review, is a call to all nations to be able to prepare their voluntary report on the SDGs, what progress they have made and how far they are, what are the challenges and all that. So if you look at that report that we produced last year and was presented in New York, you observe that for each of the goals that we discuss, we then look at what have been the challenges. So it's a very transparent document because you see all the good things there and you see all the bad things there, right? And it tells you an area that Ghana is making progress, an area that we are still struggling, because it's a call for collaboration. And it's much open because it's subjected to various experts and their review and comment. So that's what we do. And once you pick it, you could see how we have actually mainstreamed these areas and how the report is showing the progress that we are seeing. And at the end of every goal, what we did at the time was to be able to highlight what are the emerging interventions by government in addressing this. So there are several interventions that government is embarking on. Now, in the area of Goal 12, for instance, if you check our policy framework, we intentionally made provision for all sectors and districts to respond to and across the various dimensions. And in some of the strategies, we were able to align to Goal 12. For instance, you could see we said, provide incentives for the production and supply of quality raw material to support industries. And that was aligned to 12.1 and 12.2 of the targets under Goal 12. To support recycling and reprocessing of industrial waste, to extend the industrial value chain, we do have developed the capacity of farmers to use meteorological information, enhance post-harvest management protocols on storage, transportation, processing, in that order. You can also see issues like institute measures to reduce food waste, food losses, and avoidance of practices. And that you could see under 12.3 of the target under Goal 12, promote warehouse receipt system. This is very, very important to be able to sustain the entire phase. So that is how we go. And you could check it one after the other across all the goals. Now, Mr. Chairman, giving you this background, how at the national level, we do integrate the SDGs and, of course, into our programs, and how the sectors and districts also pick this to prepare their plans. Once they are done, Mr. Chairman, they also report back to us. And in reporting back to us, so Ghana, because we have mainstream our development agenda with these global goals and continental commitment, as we make progress towards our own development agenda, we're able to measure how far we are with the global agenda. So we are not actually having different systems doing the two. So at the commission, we are able to split the specific targets that the SDGs speak to, and then the areas that as a nation we are more interested in, we are also able to speak to it using the same system. And we don't work with different agencies. We work with the same agency. We don't establish different system, the same system that we use. So we avoid duplication across board. Now, with this background that has been given, which is more generic, what we do as a country, permit me to also talk about some issues that we found regarding Goal 12. If you take, for instance, the food waste index, and I must say that which is very critical in collaborating with the academia, because issues around data is very, very challenging, and sometimes our reference point are still maybe about 3 or 5 years, or even sometimes even 10 years back, and you have no option. Because for example, where we sit, we use data, and you bear with me that this is not a campaign platform where you can mention certain things. You have to back with evidence, and this document that is going to inform not only government programs and sectors program, but CSOs are also involved in this, and the world partners are all doing it, using it, and then even the international community call for these documents to use. So it must be informed by data. And sorry to just mention that this is taken back to 2015. That's at the time we were writing the report. That's what we had. So if there's more information you can share with us so that we can add to what we have. So in 2015, for example, as a country, our household waste food waste index was average around 84 kilograms per capita. That is very huge. That means that there is so much losses in this. And this figure is very critical, that it's actually telling us how much of our edible food we discard every now and then. And this must be addressed, because this has implications of food security and so many other things that we can talk about. So it tells us there's a lot of inefficiency in that area that we need to address. So Goal 12 is very critical and something that as a country we can't do without. Now, it also tells us that issues of storage is a problem. Storage is a problem. Distribution is a problem, because they all combine to fit into this particular aggregated figure. So that's an area, Mr. Chair, that we will encourage further research into it, drawing more investment in that area to be able to address the issue that we are facing. While we are making some progress in the area of post-harvest losses, there are still much challenge to address. And you bear with me that even on the road, you are likely receiving some likely or potential post-harvest losses, right? Even in our communities, even your own garden that you have, you are likely to even experience it, right? So these are issues that are going on, and they are issues of concern because it has implications on sustainable consumption. So while we have made some marginal improvement in these areas, there's much to be done. I must, however, admit and say that between the period of 2018 and then 2019, for instance, the rise rice and sorghum, we're able to reduce their losses over there, and that really help as a country. For example, 2018 to 2019, between that period, we found the reduction in rice and sorghum by 19.9% and 7% respectively. But others were so marginal and others almost remain unchanged. But the figures still tell that there's so much to be done as a country. Mr. Chairman, there are several programs that are also ongoing to address these challenges, and these need more funding. They need more efficiency in their operations, and then they also need more support from stakeholders, because this thing that we are talking about need a joint hand to get it done. It's not done by one person. So if you look at it carefully, there are some prefabricated warehouses that we have that is also speaking to address this. Is how do we expand it? How do we ensure efficiency? The management of it is very critical as a country. And there are also some fish processing centers that we see across the country, particularly in Takrady and then even New Ankasa. So these are areas that we have some of these things. But the scope, the coverage is also a challenge, because we have this challenge that we need to address. And there are several other programs that are being put in place. If you recall, the new National Fishery and Agriculture Policy that is also helping to address some of these gaps. So these are all there to help us. But another space that we are finding a challenge beyond the food and others is also this recycling challenge that we have, the capacity to recycle as a country. How do we actually be able to catch up? So there's a lot of collaboration between government and private agency. For example, you bear with me how Zoom and the counterparts are also doing very well in this space. But enough is not enough in what they are doing, because relatively there's so much challenge as a country. We need to back up. So there are several of these recycling that is going on at mass scale and then medium scale. But that is still an area that we want to work further. Now, one potential challenge, which is also having a critical issue and speaking and having implication on Go12, also has to do with our famous and when we don't know when it will die, is the mining, the illegal mining activities that is creating a challenge that we all bear with me, that this is something that is having so much implication on us, on the environment, and that has a lot of implication on food security, implication on so many other things that we sit here to talk about, even our deforestation and all that. I think about 2 days ago, I was watching TV and there was a show on this, some community and how mining is destroying their cocoa farm and how people are leaving this agricultural environment into that. So that has a lot of implication, even in achieving the targets under Go12. And that also have poverty implication, inequality implication, Go8 job creation implication, because this is not sustainable. You get a point where you can't even sustain it. So today may be beneficial to many, few that are there, but on the last scale, the entire country might suffer from it, because almost everything that we are taking in the urban community come from the rural, come from these areas where there's disruption. So there's some amount of, if quote unquote, maybe poison in whatever perhaps we may take. So this is an area that we need to work on more. Now, while we are interested in recycling, the capacity to recycle in terms of the funding, the investment, because the Go12, the value addition in Go12 is so huge, but the investment is also very huge. And that means that more collaboration with the private sector to be able to address that is very critical. Mr. Chairman, maybe before I conclude, we need to also strengthen our programs and regulation in the environment that is curtailing and supporting the Go12. Some strict punitive action need to be unveiled, because some of the issues that we are seeing is becoming a behavioral, more or less chronic. And this is the time as a country we need to stand together to ensure that these enforcement are not compromised. We need to also emphasize and strengthen our waste management. Just about near about 2 days ago, that was on Tuesday, the National Development Planning Commission, together with stakeholders, and in Ghana, I say there's implementation coordinating committee. That committee is the one, that's where the commission chairs, the one that is coordinate all our development goals on the SDGs and Agenda 2030. And there was this circular dialogue that we had and SG financing. And it became so clear with other key stakeholders like Zoomline and others present, so clear that there's so much waste, but the management of it is still minimal. Because despite what private sector is put in, despite the effort from government, there's still much gap. And that value chain needs to be addressed. And that was an issue that came up. I must also say that when we were looking at it from government prioritization going for the SDGs, because globally it's not clear to everybody that no country, including Ghana, can meet all the 70 goals if they don't do something unusual. So doing business as usual will not get you anywhere. Because as of now, globally, we are around 12%, where some of the goals, I mean, not that we have achieved 12%, but we are even on track to achieving some of them, and some of them at a slow pace. So if you spread it to other countries, then you see how we are far away from each other. So that means that we need to be more innovative. We need to be more ambitious to tackle this, because it is our own development. And sometimes they say about SDG does not fit very well with our development agenda. Like I mentioned, if you got me right, you will see that prior to the SDGs, we already have our plans working. And when it came, we never went to develop another plan. It is our own development plan, and that only to mention it. Um, so there is much that is being done, but we still have more to do. Let me also use this opportunity and just indicate to you that in that dialogue that we had, which is what now Ghana is going to focus on, emerge 5 areas or targets that we have to prioritize. And these 5 areas of targets were so much linked to all other targets. And we did the calculation, we observed that out of the 169 targets that we have, everybody has as a country to meet, on the first phase of the first direct interlinkage, we observed that we were able to cover 140 out of the 169, and the remaining were covered in the second stage and the third stage of indirect interlinkages. And one of the first that came up was 16.6. How do we ensure efficient, transparent institutions at all levels? Right, so this is a call to us that we need more emphasis in this area of transparency in all that we do, of accountability of the people that are in charge of our environment, people that are in charge of these specific goals, particularly also in the area of Goal 12. You could actually assemble all the government agencies, private agencies, and sometimes there's so much attention on government, but what you have observed is there's so much also being done by CSOs, but the coordination among that is a challenge. And there's also so much even done by development partners, and there's a lot of challenge in the coordination. So this effort must come together to work together for us to achieve it. So maybe on this note, the chairman permit me to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richard Osebufa, for sharing the perspective of Ghana on the topic with us and for pointing us to areas we should be focusing our research on. Thank you very much. Few announcements. Please, to our guest, the washroom is to my right. So you take the right, walk on the corridor there, about 50 meters from here. You won't miss it. So just in case you need to use the washroom, it's over there. We will invite some of our guests to share their fraternal messages with us. So we want to find out whether we have the rep of British Council here. Give us a wave if you are here. Good. Do we have rep of Action Aid Ghana? Did I see a hand over there? Oh, okay. Sorry. Do we have Friends of the Nation? Center for Environmental Impact Analysis? Stack Energy? Thank you for coming. Do we have Arocha Ghana? Okay, so for now, we will have the fraternal messages from the rep from British Council and then the other one. As the others come, we'll introduce them. Thanks for your attention.
Good morning. So, greetings from British Council, from the country director, Mr. Nido Didodo. So, we have to just say that we thank you so much for inviting us. And as British Council, we also have what we call strands in the higher education, and anything about sustainability is also our focus. So, when it comes to British Council, where we have TVET, exam, higher education, and schools, art and culture, we always try to make sure that we partner all institutions when it comes to sustainability. And thanks to Dr. Richard, I listened to him carefully, and I think everything that he said is on point. And British Council, our doors are open for partnership when it comes to what sustainability in terms of environmental sustainability and production as well. So we are not going to say much. We just want to wish all of you a success and thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your rapt attention. At this point, I would want to introduce the keynote speaker for today's event. He is a renewable energy and policy expert. He is also a development communication, international trade, and infrastructure development professional. He has about 10 years of working experience spanning academia, international development, and the public and private sector. He's also very privileged to have worked with UN Environment Program, Clean Cooking Alliance, and Netherlands Development Organization. He's also been trained by very prestigious universities like the University of Oxford and then the University of Ghana. That is just to mention a few. So I want us to gladly welcome Mr. Prosper Ahmed Amukwando. I'm sorry, I'm not very used to the name. Yes, please, let's welcome Mr. Amukwando. I'm sorry I murdered your name. So sorry.
My grandfather tells me that if you see your neighbor's house on fire, you put yours, or if you see your neighbor's beard on fire, you put yours in water. I have brought mine here. When I entered and looked at the poster, the way the arrangement of the pictures were, you see a prof here, vice chancellor, another prof, pro vice chancellor, a doctor, then mine. So I wondered whether the organizers intentionally arranged it that way. So when I saw it, I decided to put this bonnet on so that I can withstand the seeming intimidation that I may face. And I always wonder why, what is happening with me. Each time there is an event where the vice chancellor is supposed to be there on paper, I come and he's not there. And today is the second time. Anyway, we'll take it like that. Mr. Chairman, before I start, I would want to give you a very disheartening story that I listened to yesterday. And that story relates to what we're talking about today. I don't know how many of you are aware that Nigerians had an election petition. And yesterday, the ruling was given. The Labour Party, led by, and other parties led by Tinubu and the rest, petitioned the Supreme Court of Nigeria against the declaration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu's victory. And yesterday, they dismissed the petition for lack of merit. They were very gracious enough that the dismissal was not as frightening as Atoguba did in 2013. But this is the story. It relates to Peter Obi. He said that when he was taking some executive courses at Harvard University, he was in that class for about 1 month, and they were discussing development. For that 1 month, the professor never mentioned Africa. There were other distinguished business executives in the class, and he thought as a governor he was waiting to hear Africa. So the penultimate day of the course, he raised his hands and asked, "Prof, we've been in this class for 1 month. Permit me to use his accent, 1 month. But I've not heard you mention Africa. What is the problem?" The professor told him, according to Peter Obi, that tomorrow I will tell you why Africa is not mentioned. In fact, Dr. Bofa, I think your presence is needed for this story to be complete. So the next day, he told him that, "Peter, I have not mentioned Africa because the world does not plan with Africa." Have you ever seen Ford Motor coming out with Africa specifications? Have you ever seen Tesla come out with Africa specifications? He said the world plans with countries or jurisdictions that have long-term development plans. Then he asked, Nigeria or in Africa, do you have a 30-year development plan in your country? Do you have a development plan that outlives the tenure of a political party? At least if you don't have the ambition of breaking the 8th or the 16th. Peter said no. Then the next day he said, "Okay, Peter, let's go for coffee." Then he gave Peter $1. And I learned that never tempt a Nigerian with $1 note. And asked Peter, "Peter, between this dollar and your Naira currency, which one will you opt for?" Then he said, "Of course now, Oga, I'll go for the dollar." He said, "Why?" He said, 100,000, 10,000 is equivalent to $1. Then he said, "Peter, you do not like this dollar, not just because of the exchange rate. You do not like this dollar because you are not very proud of your country." And he said, in America here, it is a crime for somebody to squeeze the dollar or manhandle the dollar note or even put it on the ground and step on it. And finally, he said, in America here, it costs less to print the dollar than it costs to print the Naira. Why? the dollar has only 2 color combination, but the naira has different colors. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here to talk about integrating responsible production and consumption into development agenda of developing economies, particularly exploring policies and scientific options. Mr. Chairman, deans of students and other schools present here, our special guest, Dr. Richard Osei Bofa, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Faculty and students, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the honor of inviting me as a keynote speaker for this year's Sustainable Development Conference under the theme, Integration of Responsible Production and Consumption into Development Agenda of Development Economics, Exploring Policies and Scientific Options. I consider this as an honor and an indirect invitation to be part of this family of yours, that is the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. Mr. Chairman, in fact, I can't see the chairman. Thank you very much, because I was addressing. I'll give you a story about Krobeduse that I told some faculty members in Ho. But this is the second time that I'm meeting to interact with faculty members of this institution. Our first meeting was in July this year at a conference that your university successfully organized in partnership with the Frederick Herbert Shifting, Ghana, at the Folta Serene Hotel in Ho. I was invited to the conference as a speaker, and I had very fruitful discussions on circular economy transition for accelerated green jobs opportunities. It was an opportunity for me to share practical and industrial insights on circular economy and on how Ghana can take advantage of the opportunities that circular economy transition presents. It was also an opportunity for me to learn from the immense experiences from your faculty who are very knowledgeable in their areas of profession. As I indicated, if you come in the midst of professors and lots of PhDs, if you don't take time, you might be intimidated. But my goal today, standing here, is no different. I am here to share some insights, engage in very exciting discussions, and learn more about the policy and scientific options for integrating responsible production and consumption into the development agenda of developing economies. I therefore want to use these opportunities, as Dr. Bofa said, to congratulate the conference organizing team for putting together yet another successful conference. Ladies and gentlemen, I think they deserve a resounding round of applause. Mr. Chairman, the conference organizing team could not have chosen a more apt theme for this conference than what they have done. This theme is very appropriate in the sense that this conference is being organized at a time when global economies, especially developing economies, are recovering from the ravages of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war that has disrupted global value chains. We are meeting here at a time when the whole world is discussing how to mitigate and adapt to the destructive impacts of that animal called climate change. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, this conference is being held at a time when global economies are reviewing their development plans and restructuring their economies to be more resilient to the impact of future pandemics, future disruptions in supply chains, and climate change. It will interest you to know that as we speak, the first ever Africa Climate Change Summit is being held in Nairobi, Kenya, where African leaders and those of our continent's development partners have gathered to explore strategies of driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world. For the first time, Africa is thinking about solving global problems. That is good. Just as developed economies are doing, it is very important for developing economics like Ghana to also start
having intentional conversations on how to restructure our economies to be more sustainable and resilient to global shocks. In time past, what we engage more in is the prayer warfare, instead of doing what God has endowed us with our heads. But I just hope after this conference and with the presence of the media and how they report it, we will intentionally start having conversations, and I mean real nationalistic conversations on how to restructure our economies. Just as the developed economies are doing, it is very important for us not to engage in the business as usual conversations, as Dr. Bofa indicated, but for us to begin to talk on productive areas of how we can restructure our economy. This is the time for these economies to consolidate their gains. Time for the leaders of developing economies to rally the productive capacities of their citizens, such as scientists and policy experts, to develop bold and concrete plans. And we are talking about plans that outlives the tenure of any political party. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the effective implementation of these kinds of development plans is what has made developed economies what they are today. And the kind of development plans we are talking about are those that are developed by the majority of our citizens through consultative processes that are legally binding on every political party of the day. Not the ones that you scrap away, and then when the new government comes to power, they will rally all of us, those who took part in developing the previous ones for the erstwhile administration. And what we just simply do through smart working is you cut and paste. The thing is that you change the font size and the font spacing. Mr. Chairman, in difficult times like this, when global economies are restructuring their economy, developing countries like Ghana cannot stand and sit and wait. They cannot wait for developed countries to come and lecture us on how to start restructuring and when to do so of our economies. And one of the most important and crucial ways that developing and most of the time resource-rich countries can have productive conversations on how to integrate responsible production and consumption best practices is for us to sit together and share ideas. And I mean sitting together not to impose ideas on others. Dr. Mofa may agree with me. Sometimes the political parties will call you and expect you to use your technical integrity to endorse their intentions on paper. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, responsible production and consumption is an important sustainable goal that is aggressively pursued by all countries. Integrating this into the development agenda of developing economies is crucial for sustainable development and addressing challenges such as climate change, resource depletion, environmental degradation, among others. It also promotes the socio-economic well-being of the citizens of developing countries. This integration requires a combination of policies, strategies, scientific innovations, collaborative efforts, as Dr. Amofa mentioned, and actions to ensure economic growth is pursued in a way that is very sustainable. Therefore, I wish to present some key policy options that developing economies should pursue to achieve this effective integration. 1, developing economies should formulate and implement. In fact, I have underlined the word implement here. We have gained the notoriety in this country where we come out with very beautiful and wonderful policies and plans, but we struggle to implement them. The only implementation is only in research thesis. 2, we should develop and enforce regulations that promote sustainable production practices, ensure efficient reuse, and reduce environmental impact. These regulations include standards on emission control and waste management. Again, we have wonderful regulations, but it's as if those regulations apply strongly to citizens who are regarded as Pharisees, but do not apply to other citizens who are regarded as first-class citizens. If you want to actually achieve an effective integration of responsible production and consumption, you must have a holistic and fair enforcement of regulations. The fourth policy option that the development countries should pursue is provide tax incentives and subsidies to businesses that adopt environmentally friendly production methods or produce sustainable products. This can lower the cost of transitioning to productive, responsible production and encourage responsible consumption and production. In other words, our tax subsidies and rebates should be targeted. You should not be granted tax rebate or a subsidy or even a waiver at the port because you subscribe to the existing or the political power of the day. If you want to grant sustainable tax incentives, it should be based on this. Those whose activities contribute positively to our environment. Mr. Chairman, in developed economies, scientific studies or research mostly precede policy formulation. In other developing countries, people sit at beer bars or dining tables, and if they don't like you and you are a businessman, a policy formulation takes place and they will come and take action. The leadership of developed countries empower their scientists and researchers with the needed resources and rally them to carry out studies and produce empirical evidence to inform policy formulation. This is a fundamental principle in resource-based policy formulation. Now, as a politician once said whilst in opposition, if you get this fundamental principle weak in your policy formulation process, the shambolic state of your economy will expose you. Mr. Chairman, this is the method of formulating policies that will support the effective integration of responsible production and consumption into the development agenda of developing economies. In view of the established importance of science and research, the scientific options for successfully integrating responsible production and consumption best practices into our development agenda include the following. One, and this is very important, there should be serious investment in research and development of clean and green technologies, such as renewable energy sources, energy efficient production processes, and eco-friendly materials. We should not remain with the status quo, where we wait for the developed countries to do research, implement them, and then at best, we go and take the findings and attempt to implement. At worst, we become consumers of the products of such research work. Number two, research institutions should utilize life cycle assessment methodologies to assess the environmental impacts of products and processes throughout their life cycles. Life cycle assessments can help identify the carbon footprints of products and technologies, as well as identify areas of improvement and innovation. I'm a green technology evangelist as I stand here, but I'm also a scientist. My background is physics and mathematics at the University of Ghana, and I'm happy to see my former faculty mates here. There has been a lot of talk about the greenness of solar systems or solar panels. As an energy professional, I have always had the worry to correct people's vocabulary. Because if you realize in international development, there is also a little bit of propaganda. The correction is that solar panels or solar cells are not completely green. They are only relatively greener. And life cycle assessment like this will help assess the carbon footprints of these technologies and inform government when it comes to policy formulation. Let's face it. How do you, in fact, to produce a solar cell or melt the ingot, you need a lot of energy intensity. Where do we get the cheapest cells from in the world? China. So how do you tell me? You use coal to produce solar cells, and you come and tell me it is green. It is tantamount to robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then introduce some propaganda so that you can have competitive advantage. Mr. Chairman, academic and research institutions should develop data analytics and decision support tools that will enable businesses and policymakers to make informed choices for responsible production and consumption. Finally, Mr. Chairman, developing economies should foster a culture of collaboration between research institutions, industry players, and government institutions to drive innovation in sustainable practices. Government institutions and companies should, as much as possible, have units or departments dedicated to research and development. And this will collaborate with other institutions to help evidence-based policy formulation. And this will also ensure that those policies are relevant and increase the likelihood of success during implementation. There should be this same collaboration in monitoring and evaluating the impact of the policies. Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't want to proceed further. From my experience, as I indicated, this is my second time of encountering the faculty and members of this institution. I would want to, stop here and then turn this whole keynote speech into a keynote discussion. My goal, therefore, is to invite everybody to a stimulating, educative, and honest discussion. But let's be reminded that to effectively integrate responsible production and consumption best practices into the development agenda of developing economy, it is essential that we create a conducive policy environment whilst leveraging scientific advancement to drive sustainable innovation and practices. This is the only approach that can lead to the socioeconomic transformation of developing economies and ultimately transition them from third world countries into first world ones. And as I stand here, those who know me very well know that I am not part of the clergy. In fact, I attempted joining the clergy back in the late 1990s when I was a student at Notre Dame Minor Seminary. We went there to hear the call to serve God. But when I was there, 1999, I heard the call, but my mom came and cocked my ears and said, "You are my firstborn. I cannot sit and wait and look at you go and become a reverend father." So that is how I did not get close to the clergy. But I don't need to be a clergy to be able to remain optimistic that your young but promising institution will one day become the hub of solutions to our environmental and sustainable development problems on this continent. I foresee one day where the Nobel Prize laureates on this continent in areas of environment and sustainable development will come from here. And depending on where you and I will be, whether you are in the evening of your life, we will boast and knock our chest that it was here that we sat together, had discussions, and then forecasted and prepared the next generation to be able to achieve whatever I'm talking to you now. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your audience. God bless you. God bless this university. And God bless our homeland, Ghana. And may we solve our problems today collectively and not wait for the next government, as our president told us a few days ago. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you. Sorry, we were discussing how to save the world given the climate crisis being discussed in Nairobi. Mr. Chairman, um, keynote speaker, Mr. Prosper, Dr. Bofa, fellow senior members, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to be here and to engage on such a sensitive issue. Which we are now faced with discussing at this stage in our development. Well, before I start, to be forewarned is to be forearmed, so I also came prepared. See my water here. Uh, thank you for the earlier cues. Hearing much of what has been said, I think that we can frame this discussion by looking at some more general and some sort of broad overarching issues that kind of situate much of the concerns that we have expressed here in our understanding. I was with some colleagues last week who were basically saying that the categorization of countries into developed and developing countries is gradually being revised, and now they prefer to refer to us as the global south. Because if you talk about develop and developing, we'll probably never finish developing. And we can be developing until Jesus comes. But if you say the global south, it puts us in a particular context and perspective so that we can analyze the issues that we have in relation to development. Nonetheless, I would say that this discussion can be framed along a number of specific roles for the main institution, which is government, who can lead the implementation of the integration of responsible production and consumption. And I've been talking to some of my students about this issue, specific policy roles of government. Why? Because in the process of developing, it is usually there's usually a leader, and everybody else follows. Right? So more often than not, we turn to government because they have not only do they have the policy or the power to implement the policy, they also have the power to implement. And since we are talking about implementation, perhaps we can look briefly at some of these roles. The first key role, very broad role, as far as implementing any type of development agenda or policy is concerned, is formulating the policy. And our two esteemed colleagues who have come here before us mentioned this, spoke about aspects of policy formulation, what is happening currently in Ghana, the work being done by the NDPC, and then also on a broader level, some of the key policy actions and provisions that government is expected to deliver on. This is what we are looking forward to. Right? More of such policies are expected. As Mr. Prosper mentioned, the African Climate Summit is underway in Nairobi. There's a lot of talk going on there about climate finance, etc., etc. But usually the key outcomes from those things are what? Policy directives, new policy provisions, and a refined policy framework as far as climate issues are concerned. The second most important role, which I've spoken to my students about, is creating institutions. Because institutions are if you like, the wheels on which some of these policy provisions are going to be enforced. Now, rhetorically, I ask if we need more waste management institutions. Do we need government to come into, decentralize the space so that it's not just perhaps a few waste management companies that are doing the job? If we really want to get this aspect about circular economy and climate-friendly situation right, then perhaps we need to, spread the management of waste resources across, so that we are able to build enough capacity to enforce policy. But this is something that we should think about. Beyond that, in the work of institutions is also about practice, firm practice practice of economic agents and institutions. Why? Because institutions are made up of people. It is people that make up the institution. We here at the University of Environment is not an abstract concept. We are here. We are working, are we not? Yes. So, how do we effectively integrate some of these policy provisions into the practice of institutions and economic agents? Is one thing that we should be thinking about going forward from this conference. The third most important policy rule I think I should mention, and worthy of reflection for all of us, is the issue of training, which is to say that once the policy has been provided, the frameworks have been written down, and everything looks beautiful, and the institutions have been set up, right, and given the appropriate human resource, people need to know how and when to act. That comes through years of research and development and collaboration, building new partnerships, and reminding people of the importance of new development issues like the climate agenda that we are faced with today, and how we can be responsible, environmentally responsible for the work that we all do. Fourthly, I will talk about funding as an important policy role. It is not enough to have the framework. It is obvious that we need to support it. However, the one key issue that arises out of the issue of funding is how sustainable it can be. Right? So, if, for example, as part of responsible production and consumption, the government chooses to ban, imported used cars, right, and decides to introduce some new fiscal measures in that regard, is that alone enough? Is a tax alone enough to curb and retool people or revise their behavior, as far as protecting the environment is concerned? Where do we access sustainable finance? If we really want to integrate and push this agenda for environmental responsibility. And then finally, under this issue of funding, how do we manage the debt situation that may or may not arise out of pursuing an objective that requires additional capital resources? Some of these questions, maybe we can answer now. Perhaps we will get them right in the future, but they are worthy of reflection. Why? Because in this part of the world, we are more often than not responding to what is happening elsewhere in the global north. Yes. I had to take my time because we are all used to the developing and develop. Yeah. So what is happening in the global north, right? We here in the global south usually need to take our time to respond. And that also says that we are all not at the same, we are all not at the same stage of development. And so, in pursuing an agenda that requires responsible production and consumption, how are we going to access sustainable finance and manage our debt situation, and also encourage a culture of recycling? Because it's not just about what happens at the macroeconomy. Even at the micro level, people need to appreciate and understand why pursuing such an agenda is important. And that requires changing behavior. Right? When we were younger, it used to happen I used to see it on TV, they say, do not litter elsewhere. But I think even today, people still don't remember that. Right? So it doesn't matter whether you are driving along the road, this bush or whatever, you shouldn't litter. It means you shouldn't litter. That we must get to that stage as a country where we accept and have imbibed that type of understanding that we are going forward and we are choosing to be environmentally responsible. I will not waste too much time. This is my last point on government's policy role and how to set the state towards integration. And I will talk about management. Right? Because after you are funded, you have created the institutions, you set the policy framework, how do we manage the existing resources without abandoning half-baked projects and semi-finished projects and almost always thinking that because the agenda remains, we almost always need a new institution or a new framework. This is something that should not matter whether you have a new government or not. Managing resources is at the heart of how we may progress in developing or implementing an agenda like this or any other agenda. So on this note, I want to thank the earlier speakers for pulling and drawing our minds to such important issues. I personally have benefited a lot and learned a lot from their presentations. And looking at it in light of some of these policy roles that I've just mentioned, it looks like there's a long way to go. We still have a lot more to discuss, to figure out as a country. But I believe that we shall surely get there, as Prosper has mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siama. Please, I have a few announcements for you. And then the first one being that we have participants from Nigeria. Please, if you're here, you can kindly give us a wave so that we welcome you. Thank you so much for being a part of us. Secondly, we want to talk about our break and then our snacks. Okay, so please, you're going to have a 30 minutes break where we're going to have our pictures right opposite the auditorium. We also have reps from Arocha, Ghana. Please, if you're here, kindly wave so that we welcome you. You're welcome, sir. Yes. Please, we also want to plead with all our registered participants and invited guests and functionaries to kindly go to the registry for their coupons for lunch. Okay, so please kindly take note. Thank you very much. Please let me add that we're going to have our snacks at the senior members cafeteria. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so now we've been sitting for a while, so we'll step out to take our group picture. And then from there, we'll have